Okay, welcome back to the Snap. Michael Heaver here, and of course, Patrick, this is our first episode since that very disappointing England final. So near, so close, but we didn't quite bring it home, did we?
No, we didn't. Not to get too much into the football tactics, but we obviously had a great start to the game. First 20 minutes, bossing it, but then we seemed to go into our shells, and it was a bit like Croatia 2018 over again. Many of us feel that Gareth Southgate could have made some more positive changes earlier, but nonetheless, looking over the whole tournament, they've achieved more than any England team for 55 years. So you've got to look back on it with some sense of fondness.
Absolutely. Well, a big vote in Parliament yesterday, Patrick, on an issue I know a lot of people really do care about in terms of foreign aid. Of course, we've seen the UK's foreign aid budget balloon. What is, in my mind, a totally ridiculous 0.7% target, just sort of an arbitrary figure, rather than doing, foreign aid and spending money on the basis of a case-by-case basis of who needs what, for what reason, are we getting value for money? We had this ridiculous 0.7% target. The government cutting that, went to a vote, successful in cutting that by about £4 billion per year down to 0.5%. But interesting to see some of the response, Patrick, given that the overwhelming feeling in the country is in favour of cutting foreign aid.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? And so you've obviously got the Lib Dems, Labour, SNP, Plaid, Greens, all the lefty establishment parties throwing their hands up in horror and being hysterical. And we don't expect any better from them. But I think also the Conservative Party hasn't covered itself in glory on this whatsoever. You have, for instance, John Major getting on his high horse about it, pretending it's the worst thing ever. And yet when he was Prime Minister, an average of 0.3% of national income was getting spent on foreign aid. And, even now, after having the public finances with a big hole blown in it because of the pandemic, we're going to be spending 0.5%, significantly more than him. So he's got no right to sit on that high horse. But I would draw, the other point I would draw is criticism of Boris Johnson. We've long argued to scrap that target and to put that to the electorate, knowing the electorate would want that target scrapped. Boris Johnson went into the last election keeping the pledge for 0.7%, and now, he's scrapped it, but perhaps because he knows it's popular, perhaps because he needs to save money. But it's this Dominic Cummings idea of Boris as the wonky shopping trolley. Can you trust him to hold that cut down to 0.5%, or will he just bottle it at some point in the future? So nobody really speaking up for the ordinary British person. But thankfully, that reduction from 14 billion to about 10 billion a year, at least, has gone through.
Yeah, interesting to note, Patrick, that one of the 24 Conservative MPs, so it was a rebellion. It wasn't anything like, by the way, the huge rebellion that some were hyping up, but 24 Conservative MPs did vote against cutting foreign aid, something, by the way, that's only supported by 3% of Conservative voters, according to YouGov. That's right, only 3% of Tory voters, YouGov found, against cutting foreign aid. But among those MPs voting against this is, of course, Theresa May. What do you think that says, Patrick?
Well, I think she kind of set out in her speech that it was a bit of revenge, a bit of afters, because she mentioned when she was Prime Minister being used to having to deal with rebellions. So she obviously had Boris Johnson and the meaningful votes on her betrayal of Brexit in mind. So there was obviously a bit of personal animosity there. I think it's right that her former aide, Nick Timothy, and others reckon that she was never a fan of the 0.7% commitment herself anyway. So I do see it as virtue signalling from Theresa May, other so-called liberal Tories like Andrew Mitchell, Tobias Ellwood, and there seems to be more and more Tory MPs who are more concerned with being heralded as heroes and talked up by The Guardian and the BBC than actually delivering the agenda that Tory voters want.
Yeah, and something else that may have gone slightly unnoticed, Patrick, is this vote yesterday, or went down in Parliament, obviously, the Commons, House of Commons, scrapping the system of English votes for English laws. MPs going ahead with scrapping that, that gave English MPs a veto over laws only affecting England. Michael Gove said to be one of those strongly in favour of this. What do you think it says, Patrick, that that's gone ahead, firstly? And secondly, that it's really got such little coverage? Because it seems to me, and it's something I keep banging on about, is that when you have this situation of having a Scottish Parliament, of having a Welsh Parliament, of having a Northern Ireland Assembly, even when you do get some small measures for England, such as English votes for English laws in Westminster, that's now gone. And I think, you know, we've seen it, obviously the England national team doing really well. Seems to me a sense of English identity is growing. And is the status quo that we have now really sustainable, especially when we're getting rid of things like English votes in Parliament?
No, I think you're right. I think there's a kind of war against English identity, and it's exemplified by the hyping up of a tiny number of racist social media messages, most of which come from foreign countries and not from England at all, pushing this idea of England as some threatening racist cesspit. And on the other hand, you have the Conservatives dumping this English votes on English laws because they say it was slowing up legislation in the Commons, it was too bureaucratic. I think John Redwood was the only person to raise a fundamental question in the debate about this move. Who speaks for England? You know, all the other countries of the United Kingdom have their own parliaments or assemblies, and the only measure of devolution within England that the government's prepared to countenance, and Jacob Rees-Mogg was saying that in the debate, was sort of region-wide, sort of major metropolitan mayors. Nothing that's about the English identity, the loyalty to England, that collective strength we get as English people. It's not being countenanced. And Jacob Rees-Mogg said that was because England has got 85% of the population of the UK. So the Tories, I'm afraid, have joined the other parties in a sort of anti-English devolution position. And that obviously does leave a big gap because the current status quo isn't sustainable. And the English are being treated like, you know, fourth class citizens within the Union.
Yeah, and guys, do let us know in the comments below, what do you make of this? Are you in favour of there being an English Parliament, for example? Because I know in the past, the feedback has been some calling for an English Parliament, others saying, for instance, that you should be getting rid of the Scottish Parliament, the Welsh Parliament. But the fact is, Patrick, we did recently see elections to Holyrood, and we saw what happened in Wales was the Abolish Party for the Welsh Parliament stood and didn't get a single assembly member elected. So it seems to me that the theoretical argument of, oh no, actually just end devolution, that's not going to happen. The Scottish Parliament, Welsh Parliament, Northern Ireland Assembly, I think, are here to stay. The question then becomes, what of England? Should we have an English Parliament, and what is the way forward, and who is going to speak for England?
Absolutely, it is. And I think we can see now the way that all the establishment parties are going to approach this is by breaking up England into regional or city region chunks. And that, to me, doesn't dignify the feeling of Englishness whatsoever. And there are many regions of England where there's not much of a regional identity. You know, you and I used to be MEPs for the East of England. The idea that someone in Luton feels massive affinity with someone in Great Yarmouth, that's just nonsense. The Englishness feeling is a national feeling. So, of course, if these other parliaments and assemblies are there, England should have a parliament too, and it should, I suggest, be well outside London, well outside the M25, and hopefully in a city in the Midlands of the North, closer to the real feeling of the country. And at the same time, perhaps you could slim down what was left of Westminster taking UK-wide decisions, or just use members of all the national assemblies to come together for a week, a month to do that job, because we don't want many more layers of political bureaucracy. But I do think it's an unsustainable situation we're in. England is being treated as, I say, fourth-class member of the Union. That's got to stop. No one should believe that England is an extreme or racist country, one of the least racist countries in the world. ever such a lot to say for it, and it deserves its voice.
Absolutely. As I said, guys, do let us know what you make of all of this. What would you like to see for England moving forward? Do let us know. And as ever, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit subscribe and the bell so you don't miss the next episode. Myself and Patrick will be back soon. Thanks for watching.
Cheers, everyone.